some extent too, a lot of this is individualized. It's particular to individuals. What is courageous for an adult might be reckless for a child. There's certain things that require a certain amount of individual consideration. I don't think there's a golden mean for what it means to be a philosopher in terms of wisdom and ignorance, or what it means to be courageous in terms of recklessness and cowardice. And as far as there's no sort of standard that fits everyone. I mean, there's good maybe generalizations for what these things mean, but I think we really have to take it down to individual considerations. What space do people occupy? And if we could do that, if we can reflect on ourselves and realize like what our limitations are, that's how we're kind of going to get to that golden mean. And there isn't, again, some sort of set standard that's going to determine like, oh, I need to live up to this. This is what it means to be courageous. I think that there's things that would be courageous for some people that are just everyday actions for others, and I think that's important to acknowledge.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with this. I mean, I think what you're getting at in some sense, it's nuanced, but I think partly of what you're getting at here is that, the wise person adopts an internal locus of evaluation. Mm-hmm. So they're not evaluating themselves according to, say, certain external standards, but they're evaluating themselves and how they act in the world and according to certain internal standards. And, in that sense, they're comparing themselves to who they are today rather than to who someone else was yesterday. They base their concept of what it is to be virtuous upon, what it is to be virtuous to them relative to their temperament, relative to their personality, whether relative to their particular aptitudes and skills as human beings. And, it might be particularly based upon the individual person, and there's like idiosyncrasies. I think it also could do, like you pointed out, it could depend upon developmental considerations. So, we might hold a lower standard of courage, say for the young child who's like learning to swim, and they're timid about jumping into the deep end. But they feel the fear, but they end up doing it anyway. And so we say they embodied courage in that sense. They were neither, overly fearful, and they were not overly rash. They had a little bit of fear, and they had a general sense that they were competent. And so in that sense, the way we appraise the situation, the way in which we evaluate whether or not they are virtuous in that sense, whether or not they're courageous, we do so in a way that's dependent upon their developmental stage. In comparison to, say, someone who is a high diver, who's a cliff diver or dives off, dives into the ocean from, huge heights and so on and so forth. To perform such an action, would not seem to be an instance of courage, right? Because they have their courage, for an act for them to qualify as courage, it would have to meet certain conditions, that are more or less, push the threshold of their level of comfort in some sense, So it seems like, our concept of virtue is partly dependent upon, the person and their stage of development, and therefore what we consider to be virtuous in one case is not virtuous in another case, and so on and so forth.